then I'm going to move around rather rapidly here. Then we haven't talked about things with feathers and wings, because in my garden, next to snails, winged creatures are my #1 bugaboo. Okay, and it's a hard thing because I feed birds too. You know, I mean, I like having finches around. I like all, and I mean, and we're just the lucky guys that my yard I have a lot of native birds. I mean, I don't have very many English sparrows, hardly any starlings, you know. It's probably because I keep in practice with my pelican, but I have, you know, we have really good population of birds. You know, towhees, the blue jays, the finches, the native sparrows, you know, and stuff like that. All good stuff, the doves. But the sparrows in particular and the finches are terrible at eating plants. Anybody do goldfinch feeding? Okay. Now, we're doing something a little unnatural there, all right? Because in nature, when the finch was to eat that seed, he'd eat it out of the seed head of a composite or a daisy, usually. All right. Well, when he does that, he's going to get vegetable matter at the same time. They're going to pick into the head, they're going to get green stuff, and they're going to get a seed, and they're going to eat it up and swallow it. You put the feeder out, all they get is the dry stuff. First thing they're going to do when they're done with the dry stuff is go into the garden and start eating the green stuff. All right, and because they need it. And some of the damage that I see on bean leaves, sunflower leaves in particular, that I have often thought was slugs and snails, when I learned to read it, it's birds, okay? Now the birds are the most evident if you look hard, and you'll see a few of these marks where the beak came down in the leaf and the bird yanked. And so he leaves a stripe that turns brown, and then maybe a dart-like piece of leaf missing. There could be all kinds of other marks from the bird too, because they'll get in the middle of the leaf like an earwig and almost skeletonize on the little finches and stuff. But they will leave these dart-like marks that you can detect, that you know it's birds. They eat all the weeds in my garden. In the winter, sparrows go down and eat all the annual bluegrass and stuff, and I don't care, that's fine. But I put in a row of lettuce, and they go right down the row and they eat all the lettuce too. I mean, they eat my peas, you know, and I don't want to kill them or anything, and so my solution to it, #1, when I start doing the transition in the garden, every year in September and October I'm doing transition, going to winter vegetables. Every year in April to May I'm transitioning to summer vegetables. And I will plead with her, please, put the bird feed away. All right, and we starve the little guys out of the yard during that period of time for about 4 weeks every year at the transition, so that 2 weeks ahead of me going out to plant the spring garden, I turn off the bird seed. The birds have to go somewhere else, so they leave the yard, and that makes my life much easier. After the plants are established and growing, then I go back to feeding, they can come back, and we're all happy. Otherwise, the other thing I use, and I brought this raggedy old tattered bit, because every time I say, do you use floating row covers, people look at me like, huh? What is that? Apparently, this is well known to commercial growers, okay? But home gardeners don't seem to know this stuff very much. Okay, it can be used, some varieties of it, thicker ones, for frost protection. So if you have tender plants or things that you want to speed up the growth in the winter, you know, even lettuce in January around here under floating row covers will grow 1/3 faster than it does in the open air. There's a lot of good uses for this. This particular variety of it, though, here, this is called Agrabah, is the brand name on it. This is the lightest grade available. This is so light that, okay, you can actually rip it pretty easily. You want some? Huh? Okay, this stuff is available through them in various sizes, different grades. The lightest type is used for pest control, and this will work on almost any pest. You know, I mean, an insect can't go through the stuff easily. Snails will crawl under it, okay? But birds can't get through this stuff. And so I'll put my lettuce out and I'll unfurl this across the patch. I use these to hold everything together, okay? And I will oftentimes take the prunings from my apple trees and the nice long straight wood that I get, you know, from regrowth every year, and I'll take it, stick it to the ground on one side, bend it over, stick another one in the ground on the other side, bend it over, take a shoelace, tie it in the middle. I get a Quonset hoop. I run down the row with the branches and then throw this over the top, and then take these, pin it down, weight the edges with some old boards or something like that, you know. And so you can make large tunnels that you can use for frost protection with the heavier types, for bird control, just throw it over the top of the crop. It floats. Leave it baggy, you know, so the plants will lift it as they grow, because it doesn't really weigh anything. The problem with it is out of sight, out of mind. Out of sight, out of mind is the worst thing in the garden. And so it's a toss-up between, will the birds eat all my damn lettuce, or am I not going to be watching things because it's under the cover? And the birds are definite. The out of sight, out of mind thing is only maybe. So look underneath every once in a while, you know. But it's good stuff. You can grow crops to maturity. The only thing you want to be aware of with that is if you have a crop that requires pollination by insects, like cucumbers, cantaloupes, melons, well, when they start flowering, take it off. You know, I used to use this in the Midwest. I had terrible problems with the spotted cucumber beetle on cantaloupes, and they'd carry a wilt, and they'd decimate my crop. So what I would do is I would put my cantaloupes in, I'd cover them with row cover, and in fact I even used black plastic underneath them because we were up by Lake Superior and it's cold, you know, and so we'd grow the cantaloupes underneath that stuff, and then when they started to show good flowering, I'd open the stuff up, I'd let the bees in. We'd let the bees go in there for about 2 weeks to get a good set. Then I'd spray the entire patch with pyrethrin to get rid of any of the cucumber beetles that had gotten in during that time. I'd cover other pests that walk and so on. Mice and rats, mousy, rat, mouse, rat. Okay, best tool for them. They got in my greenhouse, the mice, this year, and they dug up all the sunflower seeds, and they dug up all the pumpkin seeds out of the flats, and they ate them all. I'm going, why are my sunflowers coming up, you know? Yeah, this thing. Otherwise, other rodents, gophers, best tool. All right, and you notice it's dirty, it's disgusting. Bruce said, is that an antique? Gophers are very sensitive in the smell, and so I never wash my traps. I never handle my traps after I've been handling anything human. I will usually wash my hands with just plain fresh water, no soap, okay, no colognes, no aftershave, all right, because they'll smell it. And then I will go out into the garden, wring my hands in compost or some other organic material, dirt, just go out and cover myself in dirt so I smell like dirt. And I keep my traps in the same condition. These are actually hung out in the open air in the orchard because they smell like the rest of the world. The last time I had a gopher, it was a problem for me and I couldn't get them. I threw these in my fish pond for about 4 or 5 days, then pulled them out with a little algae on them, stuck them in the tunnel, and I got the gopher in 20 minutes because the fish pond disguised my aroma, you know. They smell. That's how they find everything. And here, the kind of traps that you would use if you got things larger, like this is a 1.5 for coons. And if you got coons, and if you got fish, like I got fish, you'll probably eventually resort to something like this in Fremont, because you can't go out with a 12-gauge shotgun or a 270 at 2 o'clock in the morning and blow a hole in the head. Now this is the ground squirrel. Now, especially in dry areas, these are terrible. So irrigated spots, they're not usually quite as bad. Bruce did the right thing. He put this thing in a have-a-heart trap here, right? Huh? Where are you going? He's going to take you somewhere. And I used to take him and let him loose over there, you know? Then 3 days later,
They'd be back.
I'd be at home and I'd hear the neighbor ladies screaming bloody murder. Oh my God, oh my God. Up in front of the house, in the middle of the street, is the squirrel who had made it from Warm Springs back to Centerville. He's got like one ear ripped off, one leg is lame, half the fur's missing from getting run over by a gas truck, and he's out there delirious trying to find his house. And this happened over and over again. They will home. And I just stopped.
Oh, really?
Yeah, actually, you're getting in more trouble with the law if you're transporting them, because that's a wild animal and without a permit.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Fish and game's on your case if you're moving them around, you know. You get an Estes rocket, one of the model rocket things, you know. A little helmet, yeah, a bungee. You know, you can, for mildew, a nice organic cure. Oil will slick a leaf so mildew spores don't adhere to it easily. And so if you're spraying roses for aphids right now, consider using oil because you'll have mildew problems anyway. If you mix a teaspoonful of baking soda into the mix to a gallon of water with this oil, the baking soda alters the pH, raises it. The mildew doesn't like the higher pH. It doesn't grow well. That's a home thing.
With the copper fungicide that they use for the beach girls?
Yeah.
When do you apply that?
Okay. November and February. Best 2 times to do it. Don't miss November. Don't miss November. If you miss February, okay. Some people will do it November, December, January, February, okay. But definitely November and February for best control. Mix it with oil at the same time. It'll make this stick. Oil's useful for so many things in the garden. You know, and besides, you know, we're being gouged by the oil companies anyway. You may as well take advantage of it. Use the stuff up. Once it's gone, you know, we'll have to find alternatives. The black stuff is sooty mold. I didn't discuss sooty mold. Sooty mold is a byproduct. When you have sap-sucking insects in your plants, the sugar that rains down that the ants are farming, that extra sugar accumulates as a mist all over the plant, and then a mold that's black grows on the sugar, okay? And so the sooty mold is most dangerous really just as a symptom of sap-sucking insects in your plant. You use it to read the issue. Well, then just spraying it with oil can work fine too.
Yeah.
Okay. The biggest problem with the sooty mold otherwise is that if it accumulates in enough on the foliage, it blocks the sunlight. So it reduces photosynthesis. It can be washed off on small plants. You can clean it, it comes off. But it's kind of a pain. It's easier just to say, kill the bug, forget it, grow new leaves, and let it be at that. But that's what that black stuff is. Anybody else get black junk in their plants, like coal, soot, it looks like? Yeah, that's from your insects. Okay.
Gophers and moles, when I trap them, I leave them back in the hole that they came from.
Well, I mean, there's some sense to that. Yeah, the only thing is that now, both moles and gophers, both, are actually solitary. All right? Gopher especially, but mole too. You don't have 2 gophers in the same tunnel. You will eventually get another gopher into the same tunnel. If he comes around and finds the tunnel, he'll use it, right? But they don't live together. It's a brief moment somewhere during the, I don't know, I guess it's the early winter, late fall, that the male and female gopher get together. They go on one date. She gets knocked up, he leaves. That's it, okay? And so he's gone again, and she's solitary in the burrow network until usually February to May that the juveniles are big enough that they are now gopher teenagers, and she kicks them out, all right? And when people say, well, I got a cat that takes care of gophers, that's what they're getting, the ones that are moving overland after they're thrown out of the house, usually. See, most cats are not I watch bobcats on Big Sur trying to hunt gophers, and even bobcats have a hard time hunting adult gophers. Tomcats and stuff just don't do it. They're getting the babies. So they're solitary, and so you can put the gopher back in the burrow. Chances are by the time a new gopher comes back down to use that burrow, he's pretty well become compost anyway, you know. Yeah. About the moles, I don't know. I'm not sure on that one. I've never tried shoving a mole back in the burrow, you know. I'm usually running around showing them off to everybody, you know. Oh, look, get that out of here. Look how big he is, you know. The worst thing that could ever happen to you is to have a hideously large, ancient gopher in the yard that outwits everything, even though you think are really smart at what you're doing. I mean, I had one that went on for months. Now, usually I get my gophers in hours to a week. That's usually the longest period of time. This one went on for months, and he was digging everywhere. He would make burrows the diameter of my arm, and he'd do them overnight. The volumes, I mean, it's unbelievable. The neighbor had abandoned back of the yard, poured concrete slab over it. The gopher that had been there for 20 years, you know, moved out, came into my yard, said, hey, it's nice over here, I like this, you know. And so I went after him, and he avoided poisons, wouldn't eat them. He would spring every trap I set, and I was using gangs of 6 traps simultaneously for this thing. And I finally figured out how he was doing it. He was coming up above the ground quickly, harvesting my parsley, and then taking a stalk, holding it in his teeth, and holding it ahead of him in the tunnel, because when I found some of the traps that were sprung, parsley stalks in every one of them set in the jaws. He was springing the traps with parsley sprigs, you know. Yeah, they're not, the old ones are not dumb. They've seen it all. And I mean, water, that's a joke, okay? That's a joke. I threw 6 road flares down the burrows, corked them. I threw gopher gassers down the burrows. I threw 3 kinds of poison bait, including this one, which is strychnine. He refused to eat it. The seeds just germinated and grew. Okay, and finally, I think it was a combination of factors that I'd been so persistent for months. He finally got sickened and died, probably from a lung infection from smoke from a road flare or something. He passed away. Okay, well, another younger gopher moved into the burrows, and I didn't know this happened. I just saw him still digging. I said, "He's still there." When I finally got the gopher, I got a gopher about this big. And I go, "What's this? This has been outwitting me, you know." It's the same as like going fishing when you catch a bluegill on the hook and you don't want to pull it in, and all of a sudden a big pike snags the bluegill, and you fight him for 20 minutes, and everybody gathers around and goes, "Oh my God, what do you got in the pole?" When you lift it out, the pike swims away, and there's a bluegill this big. Yeah, that's what my gopher story was like. I felt like such an idiot, but I think I got it figured out. I made up a story that puts me on the bright side of it. Okay, thank you.
So Bill, stay if you have more questions.